Coming to you from the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. Hey, James, it's good to be back with you.
It's great to be back, Steve. And I can't believe we're on episode 15 already.
I know we missed celebrating 10, but we'll celebrate 15, and we're off and running. And I'm hoping that we'll continue this momentum. And it's been nice receiving some feedback, and we know that people are out there appreciating what we're doing. So we'll keep doing it.
Oh, I agree. I mean, even the other day I was invited to be on AV Week with Tim Albright and them. And he even, before we hit record, he mentioned to drop about this program because if I didn't, he was. That's how much he likes it.
Tim's a good friend and a good supporter, and I take that as a high compliment.
I do too, because Tim's a powerhouse in the industry, so in AV. So that's to get someone like him to enjoy our show. That's great.
And if it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't be behind the microphone right now. So we'll hope he's listening to this. And if you are, know that we appreciate you, and we're giving you a shout out.
Yeah.
So today we decided that it would be good to take a little bit of a turn and talk about the user interface side of control programming, because most programmers are good at writing code, and many of them, except for a select few, probably would find themselves challenged with being able to design a good user interface. However, there's that marriage must happen. And not only is it important to be able to design a user interface that is visually appealing, but also needs to be functional, and also needs to follow some best practices. And all of that impacts how a system's programmed. I'll share with you that I know that when I started doing programming, transitioning from doing keypads to doing a touch panel was a whole different world. It kind of doubled the amount of work, because you're not only making the system work, but you're also needing to control the user, and you're responsible for that experience. And part of that also means keeping a user from getting themselves in trouble. From your experience and in the world that you're working in, tell me a little bit about how user interface fits in, and what are some of the successes and challenges you faced.
So first off, I would like to mention I kind of went opposite of you. I went from touch panel interfaces to keypads. So unlike you, where you want keypads, touch panels, I went the reverse way. My preference is a touch panel. And the reason why I prefer touch panel over keypad is mainly that the remote support to update it and make changes on the fly when needed. Where a keypad, if I need to change a label, text, or image, I need to physically go to the room, change out the label. The keypads are nicer because you are very limited on what you can do. Like we went from the product we used to use, which had 16 buttons. So you were limited to 16 buttons. If you wanted more than that, you had to add another keypad. So it came very design processing, making sure we could do what we needed to do with the limited number of buttons. Now, the new keypads we're using are 13 buttons. So it's even more making sure picking and choosing the right commands, or even macros if we need to make macros, that we get all the needs of our users in this confined space. Touch panels, I kind of, with them, I go with a simple to complex design. We use them in our event spaces. So they have a panel at the podium where the end user can use. And then we also have panels in our AV rack, and those differ. So what I do is at the user control, I put the very minimal controls that they need, so they can't get themselves in trouble. In the past, are which was done before I got there in AV, you could access the full tech commands from the panel right at the users, which then throws the users off if they accidentally get into it. Um, with that said, I have added advanced features to our panels at the users, but they're hitting and they're password protected. So only us techs can actually gain access to them. Um, that's how I kind of go with those. I keep it very simple, and then I make it more complex for the users who need the complexity.
Which makes a lot of sense. And the thing about keypads is that a lot of people think that they're so easy because the buttons are right there, but the fact that the buttons are all right there also doesn't give you the ability to control that experience. And anybody could press any button at any time, versus when you're working on a touch panel, you have a navigation and a flow to that, and you can manage your user and what they have access to or what they need at the time, or how they are actually operating the system, presenting them with what they need. What is the when you're doing macros, or when you find yourself needing more functions than 13 buttons, is that something that is then gets scaled back to say we're only doing 13 things, or do you start to duplicate the functions of buttons, or I guess use buttons for more than one thing?
So we are very fortunate in higher education is we make all our classrooms very standard. Um, so there is not many one-off rooms that would need more than our standard configuration. And we figure a 13 button can handle it. We can add 6 more, so that makes what 13 plus 6 is 19 buttons, I think it is. So we could actually go up to 19, I believe, with our new keypads. But so we're very limited of what the user can do. But again, it's a standard classroom that is very limited what they're going to do anyway. So there's turning on display, picking from a very limited number of sources, and volume control. Some rooms have screen controls, some don't. That's something we are trying to streamline a little better, but it's very limited. There's no way to get in trouble. And rooms that really need to go over that, it's more of an event space, which then we bring in the panels.
Interesting. It certainly is certainly provides simplicity, and as you said, the standardization of it gives, I would imagine, a professor or somebody who's non-technical something that they can just look at face value, and be able to probably read the label on the button and know what they need. There are no surprises when it comes to button panels. One of the things that, and I would kind of bring up, and I'm sure that you've encountered, is when you start to have sequences of actions happening, when something fails to happen or you need to override, not having that button to do so, or not having a way to do manual controls could be problematic. The other side of things that I think is important, and is that programmers tend to kind of have that label that they're not good. They're not good graphic designers. They're not good at being able to understand what a client needs, and they can't lay out buttons in a way that is logically thought out. And I think that's probably that to me, it seems like an old argument. Some may be color challenged, but I think more and more we've learned what needs to happen and how to present the controls now that we have the iPhone and other um, elements that represent a user interface design that we're comfortable with.
Yeah.
The
Now, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, how do you think that those elements, and how do you think we are going to be moving in the future? We've talked about HTML5 before, and we you have all the different sizes of user interfaces. Do you have if you were to advise somebody as to how to learn user interface design, do you have anything that you would present?
Yeah, actually, I am stealing this from somebody else, and I do apologize because I don't remember who said it or which podcast I heard it on, but it got talking about design and updating, especially when you go in HTML5 and stuff like that, and you have to be very methodical and making sure you don't change the user experience. And the person's example, which I think was a really great example, is when you do push out a design change, make sure it doesn't change the location of buttons. For example, like think of how you would feel if you sat in your car and your car performed an update and your start button moved. We have muscle memory. Our users have muscle memory. So you got to think about that is don't move a display power button. Even if you move it an inch, that inch could really throw your users off.
Oh, I couldn't agree more there. I think that's like a cardinal rule is how anchor your controls, especially things that are going to be visible on every screen, and have consistency and be able to give I think what I've found to be very important is navigation, and also the fear that somebody who is technically challenged doesn't want to be scared that they're going to press a button and then not know what to do after that. Either get lost or find that they don't know how to undo what they did.
Yeah.
So that's an excellent point. The other thing that I like to think about too is designing your user interface with expansion in mind. So like you were talking about, when you have standard systems, you might have systems that are kind of small, medium, and large, all maybe that fit into a similar operation, but maybe have either more seating or more functionality in some rooms. It's important to think about what the most populated room looks like and be able to scale down from there, rather than build the smallest layout first and try to figure out where you can add buttons. You kind of need to be thinking ahead, knowing that you've reserved space if changes need to be made or a system is going to be modified, or to be able to provide that consistency.
No, definitely. You always got to be thinking 5, 10 years down the road.
And then the last part that I would bring up is just the added overhead that a programmer needs to think about when they're programming in a more dynamic user interface. So you're thinking about how you're navigating, what is your feedback looking like, and also how do you make sure that somebody is using the system and getting the responses that they need in order to feel comfortable. So whether that is changing colors of buttons, locking out certain buttons, avoiding hitting buttons too quickly, that all of those things kind of get factored in when you have a more dynamic user interface.
Definitely. And that's one benefit. I like a touch panel over a keypad. Like we can put a countdown for our displays where the keypads, we're just flashing a button. and the user understands the flashing of the button is the countdown, but there's no, 60, 59, like the number saying, hey, this is going to end at this time.
And you have to worry about getting happy fingers. So,
Yep.
I think that's a good place for us to wrap up. But I feel like it's an important topic because sometimes it gets overlooked, and I think the programmer's job really has multiple facets, and this is a good example of that. Um, I'll throw to you to share how our audience can reach you and any closing remarks that you have.
Easiest way to reach out to me is on Twitter at AV_James King. I am on LinkedIn as well, James King. You can also find my monthly article under higher@av.com, which is the IT and AV column. And I'm also a crew member on AV Life, which is a weekly podcast as well.
And for me, you can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on social media. You could also connect with me on LinkedIn. I like meeting people there, and I try to post. And I also have another podcast called A State of Control with AV Nation, and it's kind of timely to share that after mentioning Tim at the start. So that's kind of my first foray into podcasting, and it's another good programming show that I highly recommend for this audience. And I work on that with my partner, Rich Ragosa. Other than that, it's thank you for being with us. And this has been Ask the Programmer.